Okay, well this is my final afternoon. This is the view from the cottage that I'm staying, and I'm going to try and put this down onto paper. Just feel the sky's about right, sun is coming towards us. Don't know whether you can see that too well due to the lens I've got. Let's just take the, there we are, if I come down a little. It's mainly about the tree and of course the roofs of the buildings in the distance, and surprising what you can do with this very simple subject. So I'm going to put the camera around onto the paper now and lead you through the very quick paint. Okay, well I've put down a rough drawing. Now I'm going to get in with a little bit of... Okay, well I have the drawing down. Now I'm going to get in with going straight with some colour. I'm going to damp the sky. I want an uneven sky. I don't want a too formal painting of this. So I'm just laying a little bit of water here and there, looking for some crisp edges within the clouds. Main thing is in the distance, I want that to blend quite well. And I need that to come down. Everything I paint needs to be painted around the roof areas of the buildings. That is very, very important because they must remain white paper. There you go. Right, so I've wetted that. Now there are some areas of grey cloud, and for that I'm going to use Payne's grey. Right, that's a bluey grey because the Winsor & Newton, with just a touch of burnt umber, just to give it a bit of warmth. Otherwise it's a little too blue. I can just see one or two little clouds there. Just a cloud there. Just trying to get the general feel of the odd cloud just coming across the sky. There we go. Now I'm going to add to that a little of the, well, it could be raw sienna, but I've got a little bit of Naples yellow here because I want that not to blend in as much as we're looking at creating greens, which it could do if we're not careful, but just to give a nice feeling of uneven, rough cloud work. And that's what I'm looking to achieve today, because it really is very windy. Nice day, but very, very windy. Now as I come into the lower area, I'm going to add a little more Naples, quite light across that lower area of the sky. And one other colour will be a little bit of crimson, just to give that sense of distance. A little bit of crimson in the clouds too, in places. Always a good thing to do. Now providing we keep that sort of position, yeah, I think that's good. That's pretty much the day, and the sun is coming through. But to show the sun, I'm going to use cobalt blue, fairly strong mix, with a little Windsor blue or Prussian blue, whichever, and I'm putting a touch of burnt umber with that, just to give that a bit of strength. And I want that blue to be quite intense, and that's going up the top there while it's still damp. Top there, a little as we come in there, and if you notice it's blending through very, very nicely. A little in the middle there where it's softening, a little under the clouds there, a little this side. I don't want to be too dark behind the tree, so I'm just being aware of that. And some smaller areas of cloud in the lower area. So I'm just dotting those in. Clouds appear smaller as they go away into the distance. So that's that. Now I'll just clean the brush and see where it's run down. I'm just lifting off and blending so we don't end up with too many hard edges. I don't mind that as much, but it's just a matter of softening one or two places here and there. Don't want to overwork that. Let's just get rid of that white area at the top. Go on that. Okay, now as we allow that to come down, we need quite a distant blue. So it's cobalt again with light red. So it's a blue-grey. That's what we're looking for. A bluey grey for those distant hills. And these are the far distant hills. We've got a bluey grey there. So we get a soft feel to the tops of those hills. Right the way through the distance there. And we paint over the tree. There we go. That will give us a nice bit of softness. That goes into some greenery the other side. Now if we're going a little deeper with the colour, in other words, a bit more red in there, just to give it just that little bit more feeling of something a little nearer, but still soft. It's that clump of, I think that is the Malvern Hills there, which is still soft, and just another touch of the Malverns there. And there we're coming into the lower area. Now this is where we need to show a little bit of greenery, and always a nice thing to do, to show up a little bit of greenery. Just going to quickly soften a couple of areas there. That. Don't mind that as much. Nice crisp softness to that. Lovely. It's looking good. Need to allow that to dry. Now I'm going to use Naples yellow. Oh, let's use a bit of cadmium for this, and cobalt blue. And this is the trees that are a little nearer. Now these are the ones that begin to take on a little bit of blue colour. Sorry, a little bit of green tone. And they run behind that field there, so we're not concerned about that. All the time we're trying to be aware of not painting over those buildings, because it's quite important that we keep those white paper at this time. I feel distant hills there. It's always lovely to paint distant scenes as well as buildings when you're in an area. And there we go. And then but adding more cobalt, more cadmium yellow to give an even richer green. Don't go too strong with this green too early, but it's always nice to pick up a little bit of rich colour here and there, just to tell us that there is trees a little nearer to the buildings than we've actually shown. Always a good thing to do. And I've not damped this, so we're going to work fairly clean with the wash. It's quite vital that that's put in a fresh approach initially. There we go. And we've got the two buildings showing off, two set areas of buildings, so that's good. We can improve on that. Now as we come forward, we've got burnt umber streaking across the field, a little bit of that green just running in, and that goes off over to the right. And then we have burnt sienna then, which is a very, very more orangey colour, which I love to paint in the fields, and it's slightly deeper than that. There we go. And once we get these on, we then allow them to completely dry. A bit more burnt umber in this field, richer in colour as we come forward, and then a little bit of light red, because I want the red to come through this field. And we're going in as fast as we can with the brush, nice and rich and red in the foreground. There we go. And I'm just going to show some what I would class as crop markings, just to give a fair depth to this foreground. See the way I'm drawing those in just as an initial start. And that's all you need to do to start your... Right, this is after it's begun to dry a little. I'm going to now balance out where the lights and the dark greens are. And it's quite an interesting way to paint, really. It can be frustrating if you don't get it right, but I'm using Prussian, cadmium and burnt sienna, picking up a more earthy, lighter yellow green to start, particularly along the hedge here. There's a darker area there. As I go behind the tree, I don't want to be too dark, because as far as that's not too dark at all. And then a little more blue now, and just clean the brush a little, because there's sort of like a willow there. Whether we can pick up that willow effect, not too concerned about that, but the way that hangs down like that. May put some branches on that shortly. And then we get quite a browny sort of earthy tree, which has a little bit more strength to it. So a bit more brown, a bit more blue. And this is a little more open at the top. See the way, see the way we've blended those two trees and created a couple of trees together. Yep. And then we go really dark now, because I want a bit of punch to this area. There is a lovely sort of dark tree there that's actually well down beyond the area in the background. Dark punch there to that. That's it. And then clean the brush, keep it dark, and just stroke in this tree that's holding in that left hand side. And that's of a different strata of tree, which is always good to paint a wide variety of different trees. It's always interesting to do that. Now I've got my main trees now in, just going to weaken that colour, and now paint in the rather blue sort of looking trees that will be behind this large tree. The key to this painting is that as you go behind the large tree, you put in the background, but you don't go too dark with it, because if you do, you end up with interfering with the greens that you already that you're going to lay on top, really. Then as we come to this edge here, where we have that overhanging hedging and a little bit of fencing along there, you can pick that up later on, and that then runs out of picture. There we are. So that's that. Now I'm going to put in the large tree. Always best to get that in fairly soon, and we do have a lot of sun coming through that, so I'm starting off with, I don't want to get too detailed with this, I'm starting off in the lower area with a little bit of yellow in the mix, because that, I hope, will be the advantage, or an advantage, once we come to painting. It's a little bit open, this tree, isn't it? Not too dense, so you know, we don't want to be too dense with this. Notice I'm using the side of the brush, painting across the paper. And while it's still damp, I'm going in much darker now with Prussian blue, Windsor blue, whichever, and burnt sienna. And this is where we're hoping to pick up the real dark tones, leaving one or two of those light areas showing through. And that will, I'm hoping, give us the feeling that light is coming from behind the trees and just catching in places. That's the general idea. There we go. Well, try to get the feeling of light by putting those lighter areas on first. Just blend that with that background tree at that point. There we are. Now, all you do, you take a rigger, got a large number 8 rigger here, and I'm going to use burnt umber with, we've got some Payne's grey there, so we may as well use that. Payne's grey and burnt umber, and I'm going to put a little bit of yellow with it, just to try and get a yellowy brown. And basically it's almost silhouette really against the background, and that sits on the ground. So we take a damp brush, and a little tip is to spread that, and that's the start of the shadow. Soften it in. Now as we work our way up the tree, we pick around areas where we feel branches will show, and this is where another area where it gets extremely interesting to paint. You look at the tree you've got, you use some of what you see, but also you have to make it up as well, which sometimes is, you know, more difficult to do when you're learning. I'll give you that. But generally, the more you paint trees, the more you'll begin to see where you need to put the branches. Don't put too many in. And always put some more in tomorrow. Remember, these lower branches are being supported. Soften that away. While it's still damp, you can work with it quite well. And some lower branches there. Okay, well I'm going to leave that at this stage. Now I'm going to go back with the rigger and just sharpen up one or two areas in the distance, and that is the next stage once that's dry. Okay, next stage is some stronger colour around the distant buildings. Let's pick up where we've got some stronger tone, which could be that strong, too strong I think. In front of the building there, front of that building. Go, a bit more blue in the mix just to set it back. Now I'm going further back. Sometimes you get a nice dark tree that needs to be put in. And particularly between two buildings, always something that sometimes they've got some pine trees in the background, and then weakening that, and then you spread that into the lighter area. That's the way you achieve the effect, like that. And in the background, that can also be teased away into the lighter area, and you create different stratas of trees behind the building, around the building, just to give a bit of impression that you've got buildings that stand out in light, and even less so for the buildings in the far distance. But you still need a bit of tree work around them. Various varying things going on. Too much for us to really put in any detail at all. Just a little bit there, just to pick up the contours of the ground and the land. That's good. Yeah, that's looking quite healthy. Okay, now I'm going to darken some trees now. It's important that we get some depth into this painting, and the depth will come with this one here, and that needs to be extremely dark. It's always important to pick up dark trees where we have light buildings. There's one there. Helps to balance that one. That's good. And we will have some touches of these dark trees as we run underneath along the bank there. Keep the tops quite uneven, and then we need to soften that as it goes behind that tree. There we go. So that will help show up that area. Good. Now we need to show up one other dark area. Don't we go too dark with these? Let's just pick up a bit more brown in this one. Because we're going to try and get the film of light from behind. That's ultimately the challenge, really. And this will be there too. That will be quite dark behind. There we go. Yeah, that's looking quite healthy, quite good. We're going to have there's a lovely pine tree here. Let's use that as the pine tree then. I do like these, so let's use this as the pine conifer tree that stands there in the field, somewhere there. There we are. Yep. And then that will probably show up the outside of the other tree, which is that one there. And we keep that light, just putting a bit of fencing in there. That's always an interesting thing to do in these paintings. You know, just give, it's not there really, but it gives an impression that there's a bit of fencing within the buildings. Okay, now the buildings themselves. Right, it's got to be very, very light, and it's light sort of Cotswold stone, so, you know, burnt sienna, burnt umber, those sort of colours, with a touch of red in it, just to give it a bit of light. Now that has to be extremely weak. It's just tinting the paper, really. That's all we're doing, because if it's too strong, then you'll lose the effect. That's it. That's the sunlit side gone in, and we'll have the shadow side finishing off. And these are very much the same. Shadow side very shortly. They will stand out very, very nicely against those distant trees in the distance. Okay, let's move on. Just going to give a little more attention to this tree. I want to show light coming through, but it is extremely dark. So that is not an easy thing to do, but I'm hoping that one tone of dark colour will help to show that glistening and clear relief against the light sky in the background. That's the theory, without over painting it too much. I think that's more or less picked that up. It's just dents in the centre there. Just blended that in. Yeah, I think that's more or less picked it up. A bit more on there. Good. Okay. Now finally, we've got to get some shadow in. So I'm cleaning a large brush. I used a large mop for this, and I'm going to put in some shadow, starting off in the background. And the shadow colour will be ultramarine with Indian red. Ultramarine, Indian red, lovely sort of shadow colour. Keep it fairly blue to start with, and pull the colour across the paper quickly. Like that. That would be all in shadow, so that would cast a shadow across the field. Like that. Bring it across a little bit further. So that's my shadow across there. That will also be shadowed, I think, there, running up the field. And paint back into the trees as well, because that will also help to justify the shadow. Then in the foreground, a little more red in the foreground, because we've got this lovely tree, and I'm depicting this as if the light's coming a little from the right, so that needs to be painted in that sort of manner, stroking across the field. It's quite elongated because of the tree. Coming towards us like that, and then it will eventually soften off like that. There we go. That's a lovely shadow, and we will have then some shadow which is cloud shadow. It's not the shadow from the tree, or any tree really, it's just a shadow running across the field. Always an interesting thing to paint in, and a little bit more shadow in the distance here. Maybe you'll have a fair enough shadow. Say one of those trees may cast shadows there. That one may as well cast a shadow. It doesn't, but I'm assuming it could do. Very soft and weak, maybe a little there. It's good. Now I'm going to bring in the rigger again, and this time I'm going to paint some crop markings, which I feel will make this picture. And what we do with crop markings, we drop those in, particularly where it's still wet, and we paint them up quite vigorously, then we gradually taper them through. So if it's still wet, that really gives a nice feel to the whole, softness to the whole thing. And those crop markings really give foreground perspective in the field. I always use them. Those of you that have painted with me out in the fields before know that I use crop markings an awful lot to give perspective in the foreground. There we are. And we also can use this dark brown just to sharpen up some edges along the field there. Maybe, you know, little touches of colour, and then you just drag across with your finger just to soften it. And this is where the field actually joins into the other field, but I'm going to depict this as it's just somewhere that just goes through, really. There we go. That's good. Yep, that's looking good. There will be just a couple of final touches. just need to strengthen up those crop markings a little in the foreground. Don't want to lose that softening of the colour. So I'm just picking away, just trying to make them come a bit closer to us rather than being too distant. Just crop markings, what they are I'm not really sure. And then as we go away into the distance they get smaller and smaller until they just disappear. Don't paint right up to the distant field with these crop markings, because that can give the impression that you're actually seeing too much, really. The eye needs to be allowed to create its own vision of depth. And apart from that, we just need some rooks or crows in the distance, really. Talking a bit funny because I've got my brush in my mouth, but just some sort of bluey grey crows and rooks and what have you, just flying around there. Just one or two, just fleeting about as they would do in this sort of scene. Trying to just give that authentic approach to them, and quite often you see them pecking around in the field. One or two here and there, 3, 4, 5, 6. A larger one there just beginning to land or take off. And all we now need to do, as I always say, is to sign the picture, which I'm going to, and that is the view from my cottage, all stone, in the Cotswolds. Okay, well I've taken off the surround, and as you can see, that is the view I'm looking at, and that is the view, my interpretation really of the view, and that's what you've got to do. You've got to interpret the view how you see it at the time, not copying every single detail. Hope you've enjoyed that video here in the Cotswolds. I will be returning home tomorrow, and we'll get these uploaded. Hope you enjoyed the Cotswolds.